Chosen one, anchor your spirit to what I am about to say right now. That restlessness you have been carrying, the one that has no name, no clear reason, no logical explanation, stop running from it, because I need you to understand something before this message goes any further. God has already made his decision about you, not tomorrow, not after you fix what you think is broken, not after you prove yourself one more time. The decision has been made, and what he has decided is this: you are leaving. The place you are in right now, the season, the struggle, the stagnation, your time there is finished. The enemy knows it, and that is why the last 72 hours have felt the way they have. It all ends soon. The waiting, the confusion, the sense that you have been standing at a door that refuses to open. But hear me when I say this: it is not ending despite what you have been through. It is ending because of it. Think back to that moment this week when you almost broke. When you came so close to saying something you could not take back, doing something that would have kept you exactly where you are. But you did not. Maybe you went quiet when everything in you wanted to explode. Maybe you pulled back when your flesh was screaming to push forward. Maybe you let something go that you had been holding on to for months. You thought that was you giving up. You thought that was defeat. That was the final act God was waiting for. You did not find this message by accident. The algorithm did not bring you here. God did. This is a divine appointment that was written before your name was spoken into the earth. You are standing at the threshold of your departure, and heaven has sent this word as your clearance. Stay until the very last second, because in the next few minutes, I am going to deliver the verdict heaven has already issued over your life. I am going to walk you through the exact signs that confirm your departure is imminent, not eventually, not someday, but soon. And at the end, I am going to give you the declaration that seals this transition and closes every door that has been trying to pull you backward. Do not click away. Your future self, the one already living in what God promised, is calling you forward. If you leave now, you leave before the decree is read. I know what the atmosphere has felt like. Not just this week, the last several weeks. There has been a strange combination of heaviness and electricity, like something is ending and beginning at the same time, but you cannot tell which is which. Maybe you have been waking up at 3 in the morning with a knowing you cannot explain, a stirring in your chest that is not quite peace and not quite fear, but something deeper than both. Or maybe you have been sitting in silence more than usual, not because everything is fine, but because something in your spirit keeps telling you to be still, to wait, to not make a move yet. Or maybe you have felt invisible lately, like the world around you has kept spinning, but you have been standing in slow motion, watching, suspended between two different versions of your life. That suspension is not punishment. That is preparation. And in that suspended place, the enemy has been working overtime with a very specific lie. He has been whispering that the reason you feel stuck is because you made a mistake you cannot come back from. He is replaying a moment in your mind, maybe a relationship you left, a decision you made in exhaustion, a season where your faith slipped and your actions did not look like someone who believed. He is pointing to that moment and telling you that is why the doors have been slow. That is why the promise has not materialized. He is telling you that you disqualified yourself, that God has had to reroute everything because of what you did, and that the version of the blessing you receive now will be smaller, lesser, a consolation. That is a deception built specifically for this moment to stop you from stepping forward. Because here is what the Word of God actually says about where you are standing right now. Isaiah 43:18 and 19 says, "Do not remember the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? I will even make a road in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Now it shall spring forth." not eventually, not after enough time has passed for you to earn it back. Now, God is not working around your past. He is not subtracting from your promise because of the moments the enemy keeps replaying. He is doing a new thing in the very wilderness that was supposed to swallow you whole. The road is being built in the place that had no road. The river is flowing in the place that had no water. You were not disqualified. You were repositioned. The heaviness you feel is not the weight of consequence. It is the weight of transition. It is what it feels like when everything that was is making room for everything that is coming. It is the pressure before the push. It is the silence before the sound. You think you have been wasting time in this season. You think the waiting has cost you something irretrievable. But let me reframe your reality right now. This season was not delay. This season was distance. God has been moving you away from everything that could not survive where He is taking you. The relationships that faded, the doors that closed, the version of you that kept showing up in places you no longer belong, all of it was departure preparation. Every loss was a lightening of the load. Every ending was God editing out of your story what cannot enter the next chapter. You are not starting over, you are arriving. And the word today is final. The decision has been made. God has decided, and when God decides, no power in heaven or on earth or beneath the earth can reverse it. You are leaving this season soon. And now that the decision has been made, now that you understand you are not being held, you are being held back for a reason. I need to walk you into something that is going to require your full attention. Because the departure God has written over your life is not just a change of circumstances. It is not merely a geographical relocation, a new job title, or a shifted relationship status. This departure is something far more profound, far more foundational. It is a seismic change of identity, and most people miss that entirely. They are waiting for the external to shift, for the scenery to change around them, for a tangible sign in their outward reality, while the internal landscape remains static, still anchored to a version of themselves that was never meant to make it to the next chapter. It's like a ship preparing for an ocean voyage, yet still carrying the barnacles and the rust of its dockside existence, failing to realize that the vessel itself must be refitted, reinforced, and recalibrated for the vast open waters ahead. You cannot carry who you were into where you are going. This is not a punitive measure from a judgmental God, as if He is punishing the old you. Rather, it is a sacred necessity, a divine requirement. Where you are going requires a you that has been forged in exactly this kind of fire, a self that has been purified, strengthened, and made resilient through the crucible of experience. Think of a seed that must break open, releasing its familiar form to become a towering tree. Or consider the caterpillar, so comfortable in its crawling existence, that must undergo a complete metamorphosis within the dark confines of a chrysalis to emerge as something entirely new, utterly transformed, and capable of flight. You are being prepared for flight, and the old skin simply won't suffice for the new wings you are about to unfurl. This forging is not a destruction, but a divine reconstruction, preparing you to hold the weight of your destiny. Think about Moses. 40 years in Midian, 40 years of what looked like utter obscurity, profound failure, and complete irrelevance to the world. He had once been on the other side of that spectrum, raised in Pharaoh's palace, positioned for unparalleled influence within the most powerful empire of his time, full of the kind of worldly power and charisma that the masses could see and admire. He was trained in all the wisdom of Egypt, adorned with the garments of royalty, a man destined, it seemed, for earthly greatness. And then one moment, one impulsive decision born of a righteous anger, and he found himself in the desolate wilderness, tending sheep, an exile, a runaway. To everyone watching, To every former admirer and every contemporary observer, Moses had utterly disqualified himself. To all appearances, the grand dream he may have held, or the destiny others had projected upon him, had died a slow, inglorious death in the sands of Midian. But God was not done. God was not even close to done with Moses. He was precisely where God needed him to be. God was stripping Moses of every identity that was borrowed, every confidence that was built on the wrong foundation of human strength or royal privilege, every version of greatness that depended on man's approval, man's systems, or man's power. Because what God was preparing Moses to do, to confront a Pharaoh, to lead a nation of millions through a desert, to stand as a prophet face to face with the divine, required a man who had nothing left to prove to anyone but God. A man who had lost enough, experienced enough emptiness, to trust completely and exclusively in the one who had called him. A man who had been emptied so thoroughly of his own ego and self-reliance that when God finally filled him with his spirit, his power and his presence, there would be no confusion whatsoever about whose power it actually was that moved through him. The wilderness was not Moses's consequence for his past actions. It was not a punishment to be endured. It was rather his divine construction zone, a sacred space where the architect of his soul was meticulously building the interior strength, humility and trust required for his monumental calling. And this is where it goes deeper for you, where the ancient narrative of Moses intersects directly with the very present reality of your own life. What you have interpreted as the wilderness of your life, that place where your most precious gifts felt invisible, unheard, perhaps even irrelevant, where your deepest calling felt dormant, like a seed buried too deep to ever sprout, where you kept asking God why he had gone quiet, why his presence felt distant, why your prayers seemed to echo in an empty sky. That wilderness was not where God forgot you. It was not a place of divine neglect or oversight. That was precisely where God was finishing you. There is a profound, often painful, but utterly crucial difference between being forgotten and being formed, and you have been formed in this season in ways that your eyes, limited by immediate circumstances, cannot fully see yet. But the moment you step into what is next, into the vivid clarity of your appointed destiny, you will turn back and look at this exact season with a completely new perspective. You will understand with absolute certainty that nothing was wasted. Not the tears that fell like rain in your lonely nights, not the confusion that swirled like a desert sandstorm in your mind, not the long nights when the ceiling felt like concrete pressing down on your spirit, and your fervent prayers felt like they were bouncing back unheard, echoing in the void. Every single thing, every challenge, every ache, every quiet moment of surrender, every perceived setback was working together, meticulously orchestrated by a loving God, even when it felt like nothing was working at all, when the loom of your life seemed to be weaving chaos instead of order. But here is where I need to challenge you with something that most people are not willing to sit with, to truly wrestle with in the quiet chambers of their heart. The leaving that God has ordained for your life, this pivotal departure from your former self and former season, is not going to happen passively. It is not something you merely stumble into or idly wait for. You do not drift into your next season like a leaf carried by an indifferent breeze. No, you actively decide into it. You step into it with intention, with conviction, with a fierce internal declaration. And that decision, that profound internal commitment, requires you to do something that goes against every instinct you have carefully built up and honed in survival mode. You are going to have to stop making yourself small enough to fit into spaces that were never designed for you in the first place, spaces that were never meant to contain the expansive, glorious potential God has placed within you. This is the part no one wants to hear, the uncomfortable truth that often chafes against our conditioned patterns. You have been accommodating your own diminishment. You have, in essence, been participating in the shrinking of your own spirit, the muting of your own voice, the limiting of your own potential. Not because you are inherently weak, not because you lack courage, but because somewhere along the way, deep within the fabric of your experiences, staying small felt like staying safe. It became a subtle, insidious coping mechanism. If you did not reach too far beyond your perceived grasp, you reasoned, you could not fall too hard, avoiding the painful crash of dashed hopes. If you did not believe too deeply in the audacious promises of God for your life, you could not be too profoundly disappointed when things didn't unfold according to your timeline. If you kept yourself just below the threshold of your actual God-given potential, you could manage the risk, control the variables, and insulate yourself from external judgment or internal heartbreak. And you told yourself, convinced your own heart, that this carefully constructed smallness was wisdom. You even whispered to yourself that it was humility, a spiritual virtue. But if you are truly honest, and this is the moment to be brutally honest with yourself, to strip away all the layers of self-deception, it was not genuine humility. It was a self-protective agreement you made with fear, a silent covenant forged in the fires of past pain and disappointment. And that agreement has had your name on it long enough. It's time to revoke that signature. What's coming next will likely surprise you, because it is not merely more encouragement, not just another wave of uplifting words. It is a stark, powerful invitation to confront the true architect of your own limitation, to look fear in the eye and dismantle its subtle strongholds within you. Fear does not always show up looking like overt, paralyzing terror. That is what makes it so insidiously dangerous, so difficult to identify and dislodge. Sometimes it shows up disguised, looking like admirable patience, whispering that it's not yet time, that you must wait indefinitely. Sometimes it shows up looking like spiritual discernment, urging caution to the point of stagnation, masking inaction as prudence. Sometimes it shows up dressed in the very language of faith itself, ironically telling you to wait, to be still, to not move yet, when what it is actually doing, in its deceptive mastery, is keeping you frozen, paralyzed in a moment God already moved past weeks, months, or even years ago. There is a counterfeit stillness that subtly disguises itself as holy surrender, presenting itself as devotion, but it is not true surrender to God's active, dynamic will. It is, in reality, a surrender to delay, a concession to the fear of stepping out. And you will know the difference, discern the true from the false, because true holy stillness carries an undeniable peace, a peace that is alive, warm, expansive, a deep-seated tranquility that settles your spirit even amidst uncertainty, the very peace of God that surpasses all understanding. Philippians 4:7. But this other stillness, the one fear builds and maintains, carries a low-grade dread, a subtle dis-ease, an underlying tension. It carries the quiet anxiety of someone who is waiting for permission they have already been abundantly given by the King of the universe. God has already given you permission. His decree has gone forth, written into the very fabric of your being and your calling. The only remaining question, the only true hurdle, is whether you will finally give it to yourself. And this brings you to the place where the real turning point lives, where the pivot from stagnation to divine acceleration truly occurs, because you simply cannot walk into your next season still waiting for someone else, anyone else, to validate what God has already profoundly verified in your spirit. There are people in your life, cherished individuals whom you love deeply, people whose opinions have mattered immensely to you over the years, who have simply not been able to see what is truly on your life, what God is doing, what He is building. Not because they are bad people, not because they wish you harm or consciously want to hold you back, but because they can only see you, perceive you, and affirm you through the lens of who you have been, through the familiar patterns and roles you've played in their lives. And what God has placed on you, the glorious new thing He is springing forth, can only be seen through the lens of who you are becoming, the version of yourself that is emerging from the chrysalis. And if you keep waiting for their external affirmation, their verbal confirmation, before you dare to move, you will, regretfully, wait forever. Because they cannot affirm a version of you they have not yet witnessed, a reality they have not yet observed with their natural eyes. Their understanding will catch up, but only after you have bravely taken the first step. You have to move first. You have to step out in faith and trust. The affirmation, the external validation you long for, follows the action. The confirmation, the tangible proof that you are on the right path, comes after the decisive step has been taken. It is the principle of sowing and reaping, of faith preceding sight. Think of Elisha when Elijah, his mentor and prophet, placed the prophetic mantle on his shoulders, signaling a transfer of anointing and calling. Elisha did not fully understand in that moment what was truly being given to him. He did not have a complete panoramic revelation of what his life would look like in the years to come as a prophet. He certainly did not have a detailed step-by-step map of exactly where this new, daunting calling would take him or how it would all unfold. He simply responded with immediate, radical obedience. He burned his plows, effectively destroying his means of retreat, severing all ties to his former life and livelihood. He said a definitive goodbye to what he knew, to the comfort and familiarity of his past, and he followed Elijah. He let the very tools of his former life, the instruments of his old identity, become fuel for the sacred fire of his moment of transition, and it was that decisive release. Not a perfectly timed, fully informed, fear-free release, which rarely happens in the spiritual journey, but a raw, courageous, decisive one that positioned him to receive a double portion of what had rested on his predecessor, Elijah. His boldness opened the heavens for him. The double portion does not come before the departure. It comes precisely because of it, as a direct result of your willingness to let go, to step out, and to trust God with an open, unreserved heart. Stay with me, because what I am about to share next is the part that often breaks the cycle for most people, the missing piece that prevents them from fully moving forward, and it absolutely cannot be skipped or glossed over. There is something deeply significant that has been growing in you this season, quietly, subtly, something you may not have fully named or acknowledged yet. It is a grief, a real and legitimate grief over the version of your life that did not happen the way you so meticulously expected, the way you dreamed, the way you prayed for it to unfold. It's the grief over the timeline you had meticulously constructed in your mind, the intricate blueprint of your future that now lies shattered. It's the grief for the relationship that was supposed to look different by now, stronger, healthier, more complete. It's the lament for the achievement, the milestone, the recognition that was supposed to have arrived by this point in your journey. It's the silent sorrow for the version of yourself that was supposed to be further along, more successful, more together by now. And because that grief has not been consciously named, because you have not given yourself full, compassionate permission to truly feel the weight of what did not come to pass in the way you so vividly imagined, it has been living underneath everything. It has been a quiet, subterranean current flowing beneath the surface of your outward faith. It lies underneath the declarations you boldly make, underneath the Sunday mornings and the vibrant worship moments, underneath the fervent prayers you offer. It has been sitting there, quiet and heavy, like an anchor you didn't realize was dragging, creating a subtle but persistent spiritual static that has made it harder to hear clearly, harder to discern God's voice amidst the internal noise. You are allowed to grieve what did not happen the way you dreamed. This is not a weakness, it is a profound act of humanity and spiritual honesty. God does not ask you to pretend the loss was not real. He does not demand that you perform superficial gratitude over a pain you have not yet fully processed or acknowledged. David, a man after God's own heart, did not do that. We see him weeping openly, inconsolably, over the death of his son Absalom, even amidst his kingship. David cried out in the Psalms from the bottom of genuine human sorrow, expressing raw anguish, confusion, and lament. Psalm 13, Psalm 22, Psalm 55. He did not package his pain into a neatly tied, consumable testimony before it was even finished being formed in his soul. He brought the raw, unfiltered, sometimes ugly, version of what he was feeling directly to God, pouring out his heart without reservation, and he stayed in that vulnerable, honest place until something deep within him shifted, until the healing touch of God began its work. And what came out on the other side of that deep, authentic grief was not a diminished David, not a broken man, permanently scarred. What came out was a David who had been excavated so deeply, so thoroughly, that God could plant something in him that could not be uprooted by any earthly storm or future sorrow. The grief, therefore, is not the opposite of your breakthrough. It is not an impediment to your progress. The grief, when you stop running from it, when you cease trying to intellectualize or spiritualize it away, and instead bring it honestly, vulnerably and fully to God, becomes the fertile ground out of which your breakthrough precisely grows. It is the rich, dark soil from which new life emerges. And here is where the revelation begins to turn in a direction you may not have expected, a powerful reframe that changes everything. The delay you have been experiencing, the prolonged season of waiting, the frustration of unmet expectations, the lingering sense that you're stuck, the very thing you have been passionately calling delay, is not actually delay in the way you perceive it. It is, in its deepest, most loving essence, protection. But not merely the kind of protection that simply keeps you from obvious harm or visible danger. It is the far more profound, nuanced kind of protection that keeps you from arriving too early. There is a version of your blessing, a manifestation of your promise, a stepping into your destiny that you absolutely could have received 18 months ago, 2 years ago, perhaps even at the very moment you first started believing for it with all your heart. And if you are truly honest, a significant part of you is likely still frustrated, even resentful, that you did not receive it then. But here is what you could not see then, what your limited perspective prevented you from grasping, and what you are only now, through the fires of this season, becoming equipped to see and understand. If it had come when you first asked for it, when your soul was crying out for it, you simply would not have had the interior architecture, the spiritual maturity, the emotional resilience to truly hold it. You would have received the promise, yes, but you likely would have crumbled under its immense weight, like a grand structure built on an inadequate foundation. You would have stepped into the wide-open door of blessing and walked straight into something you were not yet prepared to steward with wisdom, humility, or sustainable strength. God loves you too much to give you what you are not yet ready to carry, to place a burden on you that would crush rather than elevate. His delay is not denial, but divine preparation. He is not withholding, he is perfecting. But now after this season, after this refining fire, after this intense and often uncomfortable formation process, the interior architecture is there. The weight-bearing walls of your character have been meticulously built and reinforced. The foundation of your faith has been deepened, anchoring you firmly against any storm. And what could not have possibly survived in you 2 years ago, what would have withered under the pressure or been scattered by the winds of challenge, will not only survive now, it will thrive, it will flourish, bearing fruit in abundance, because you are now a vessel strong enough, wise enough, and rooted deeply enough to contain and steward the fullness of God's blessing. And just when you think you have grasped that profound truth, just when the encouragement of it begins to truly settle deeply in your chest, warming your spirit with hope, I need to take you one layer deeper, because this is precisely the place where most people still get stuck, still find themselves entangled, even after they understand everything I have just articulated. The final, often unseen thing standing between you and your full, unhindered departure into what God has meticulously prepared for you is not the enemy, though he certainly tries to sow doubt. It is not your past mistakes or perceived failures, for God has already dealt with those. It is not the people who doubted you or the challenging circumstances that tried to define you. No, the final, most tenacious thing standing between you and what is next is a deeply ingrained, often subconscious version of the story you have been telling yourself about who you are that is simply no longer true. You have been living inside a narrative, a self-created myth. Every single person does. And inside that narrative, you have assumed a specific role, a character you have been inhabiting, a persona you've worn like a second skin. That character was often built out of your deepest wounds, your perceived lack, the sting of moments of rejection, the times love did not show up in the way it should have, or the promises that were broken. And that character, that carefully constructed self-narrative, has served you in a way. It kept you safe, shielded your tender heart from further hurt. It helped you navigate complex emotional terrains. But it is not who God says you are in his eternal truth. And critically, it is not who is allowed to cross the threshold, to step through the gate, into the glorious new thing that is coming. The old garment, though familiar, is tattered and ill-fitting for the royal robes God has prepared. There is a profound Hebrew word, teshuvah, which is most commonly translated as repentance, but at its root, its most ancient and purest meaning, it simply means return. Not punishment, not self-flagellation or endless cycles of guilt. Not an extended season of proving you are sorry for who you have been. No, it means return. A turning, a reorientation toward the original, the authentic, the divine blueprint. And what God is calling you to right now, in this very moment, is not more penance for the past. He is not asking you to pay a debt you cannot afford. He is calling you to return to the original version of yourself, the one he imagined, the one he spoke into existence before the world got its hands on you and began to imprint its limitations and expectations, before the rejection of others shaped your self-perception into something distorted. Before the disappointment of life's broken promises trained your expectations to be perpetually low. Before the constant hum of survival mode rewired your nervous system to expect loss, to brace for impact, to live in a state of hypervigilance. He is calling you back to the person he spoke into existence before you had a single reason to be afraid, before the world taught you to shrink, to hide, to compromise your divine essence. He is calling you back to innocence, to boldness, to trust, to the unshakable truth of your belovedness. And here is the part that changes everything, the part I have been building toward from the very first word of this message, the culminating truth that can unlock your future in an instant. The life you have been so patiently, so desperately waiting for, the breakthrough you've been yearning for with every fiber of your being, is not in front of you in the distant, abstract way you have been picturing it. You have been looking forward, straining toward a future that feels perpetually far away, aching for a horizon that never seems to get closer, always receding with your approach. But the breakthrough is not as far away as it looks. In fact, it is not in the distance at all. It is not something you have to chase across a vast expanse of time or effort. It is in the decision. It is in the next moment of alignment, The next choice, made not from your wounded identity, not from the character you've been playing, but from your true, authentic, God-given identity. It is the next step, taken not from fear dressed up as wisdom, not from a cautious retreat disguised as patience, but from the actual palpable peace of God that surpasses all human understanding, a peace that flows from profound trust. It is that close. It is one interior shift away, not 1 year away, not one more difficult test away, not after one more painful refinement. The final purification has been completed. The distance between you and your promise is not time. It is not a matter of waiting out another clock cycle. It is agreement. And when you come into agreement, full, unguarded, unhesitating agreement with what God has already decided, already declared, already established about your life, you will suddenly look up and realize you are already there. You have arrived. The journey was always an internal one, a journey back to the truth of who you are. Now, before you move from this moment, I want to give you something to carry with you, not just as a declaration you perform, but as a truth you receive into the deepest part of yourself. Place your hand over your heart right now, in whatever space you're in, and say this with your whole being. I release the version of myself that was built by what I survived. I release the narrative that fear wrote and the identity that pain assigned. I return to who I was before the world had a word to say about me. I receive the new thing God is springing forth in this moment, not eventually, not someday, but now. I agree with heaven's verdict over my life. I am not delayed. I am not disqualified. I am not diminished. I am departing from this season with everything that was forged in the fire, and I am leaving behind everything that was never meant to come with me. My breakthrough is not coming. It is here. It is in this decision. It is in this moment of return. I walk forward. I step through. And I will not look back. If this word landed in you today, do not let it dissipate. Do not let it become just another fleeting thought or a passing emotional uplift. Watch it again. Let it sink deeper into the fertile soil of your spirit. Share it with someone who is standing at their own threshold and does not yet know it, who needs this precise truth to illuminate their path. And leave a word in the comments, not for engagement, but as an act of declaration, an act of anchoring this truth in your reality. Write it out. What are you departing from? What are you arriving into? Because there is profound power in naming it. There is transformative power in making it visible, in speaking it into existence. And someone else, navigating their own silent struggle, needs to read what God is doing in your life, to find the courage and the faith to believe He is doing the same in theirs. This word was for you, and it is finished.